When I was little, my father was famous. He was the greatest samurai in the empire. He cut off the heads of 131 lords.
Hey everybody, Jerry Williams, aka GreaterSapien here. Thanks for stopping by. It's debate night. Kamala Harris, Vice President of the United States, faces off with Donald Trump, former President of the United States, in the first and possibly only debate between these two this election season. Now, this little intro I am doing is pre-recorded before the start of the debate, as I don't know if I'm going to be able to watch this debate live or if I'll be watching it on a recorded delay. I am currently in Wilmington, Delaware, coincidentally, the home of the Harris campaign. I'm working on a trial in town, and we have a war room set up in the Hotel DuPont. Everyone on the team is interested in watching the debate, so hopefully we will have knocked out enough work that I'll be able to watch it live. Either way, what you'll see next will be my real-time reaction to the debate. Now, anyone who follows me knows I have a bias in this election. I think Donald Trump is contemptible and a corrupt human being, a wretchedly self-serving hate monger of a politician who appeals to the lowest part of human nature, and that if reelected, he will destroy what is left of the civil electoral process if he has not irrevocably done so already. So I'm going to run back down to the war room, knock out some work, and hopefully be able to watch this live and upload it immediately after. See you soon. Okay, folks, I am back in my hotel room. Hopefully, I have my computer here. I'll be getting text messages and Teams messages and stuff like that. Hopefully, I'll be in the clear. They know, everybody knows what I'm doing. Everybody knows what everyone else is doing. Hopefully, I'll be able to do this in one continuous shot. I am not going to be editing this out, except for if I talk now and it's like another 10 minutes before the debate starts, I might take out, you know, I'm not going to sit here and fill time until it starts. But so I have it there. I'm watching it live. As you can see, it's going on right now. I'm gonna get my text. I might respond to text from family members and stuff on here as well, just so you know. Okay, so as I said in the intro that I probably stuck on the front of this, everybody knows my opinion on Trump. This is not going to be a masterclass in critical thinking. I know that I'm known for my being a proponent of critical thinking, but I've also told you that I believe politics is not a critical thinking matter. You should use it as much as possible, but the fact is we all have our political biases. If you don't like the fact that I have a political bias, whether or not you agree with me, if you don't like the fact that I have a political bias, this is not the video for you. No problem. Just don't watch. I won't be upset. So I think we're about to start. I'm going to hit unmute. I don't know what Rachel's droning on about there. Let's just see if we're about to start here.
Davis. The two candidates have never met face to face. And of course, the differences between them couldn't be more stark. If elected, Donald Trump would be the oldest person ever inaugurated to the U.S. presidency. He has spent the last few days threatening to imprison his political...
All right, okay. That's there. Let them do the intro. Okay, so I'm going to be very candid in this video. I'm going to probably be contradictory because I'm doing things on the fly. And I'm not going to clean it up. So it's going to be about an hour and a half. Because right after this, I'm going to need to bust my ass back down to the war room. But, you know, if you wanted to see my reaction to this debate, this is your opportunity. I think we're going.
David Viewer, and thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could
So
be
we
the
have
most
lead in
consequential
to deal
event
with.
of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions. And
okay, it's going to be an interesting. This is an interesting situation as far as I'm concerned, because Donald Trump doesn't believe in. He has no problems with lying. He doesn't believe in telling the truth. Unless he's absolutely certain the truth is in his favor, he is not willing to tell the truth. Debating him is like debating a flat earther, as far as I'm concerned. It's kind of almost useless to debate someone who does not have any allegiance to facts, which he does not, in my opinion. So it's going to be interesting. Okay, here they come.
Kamala Harris. It's a good debate. Thank you.
welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that
I hope they keep the split screen the whole time.
Living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
4 years ago, yes. That was the pandemic.
I was raised as a middle-class kid. And I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing.
This is not an answer to a question.
We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing. And the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children.
Personally,
and
I would have said, yes, we are better off, because 4 years ago was in the middle of the pandemic, and he shit the bed during the pandemic, and people were confused every day as to what was going on in the world and where we were. It was really unstable and people were uncertain. And so, yes, people are more certain and people are more stable. You can say that the prices are tough, but we're better off.
There was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to startup small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy.
They should repeat the question and make her answer.
My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year, because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And
the public, the consumer pays for that.
In some cases, I took in billions
See,
and
if it was
billions
me, I would have called her on not answering the question.
In fact,
her answer was fine, but it wasn't the answer to the question.
Money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. we were at
But still both doing
21%,
better
but
than
that's
other
being
countries.
generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now
Some
by
black jobs?
African Americans and Hispanics.
Black jobs.
And also unions. Unions are going
Thank
to be
you.
affected very
Black
soon.
jobs.
And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look
Hispanics are
at
taking
Springfield, Ohio.
African
You look
American
at
jobs.
Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings.
Wow, he's
They're
going straight
in
to internet.
violently. These are the people that Xi
Rumors.
and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to
Is
get
he
them
not
out
going to talk
fast.
about people eating
I created
cats?
one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell y'all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances,
His
and
playbook
name-calling.
on the
What you're going to hear tonight
bingo card.
is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025.
Project 2025 is
that the
mentioned on the bingo
president
card.
intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together. Now we have so much more.
I think you already
in
mentioned
common than what
border, too.
separates us, and
I have a
pledge
bingo
you
card
to
that
be a
someone sent
president
me.
for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group
Well,
of
that's
people
'cause you
that
don't
got
read.
together. They came up with some ideas. I guess some good, some bad. But it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I
You
was
say
the one
bounce
that
back
created
again?
them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So, Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the
Now,
richest
keep the
people.
camera on him.
I am
Keep the
offering
camera on his
what
rolling
I would
eyes.
describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse, mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan
Ooh, he said Wharton
would
School. Didn't he go to the Wharton School?
explode the
I think she
deficit.
said that on purpose.
16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. I gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance.
I knew he was going to say it.
Many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan
No,
that's
they
going to
don't.
bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to
I
be
knew he
able
was
to
gonna
go
say
and
that.
work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off,
let's say it's for our company.
She doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences.
There, now she's saying, like, that's not run, spot, run's not 4 sentences.
She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Take a look at her plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year.
She said that earlier.
Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have, and who's going to have higher prices, is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country.
Why do you say perhaps? You should know what the actual history is.
Cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country
he left an opening for her to say that she understands how much that stuff costs because she's cooked.
And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great. That
polls always go like up for him. They're always like, polls say 60, 70, 80, 90%.
The Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
That's a good follow-up, personally.
That the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military. Basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships.
Now, I'm going to constantly give her shit for not properly answering the question, but she is doing a good job of taking the question and moving it back to an attack on him.
What we need to do to support America's workforce,
but she should
so that we don't
just
end up having
quickly answer the question and then switch, as opposed to switching immediately.
But what
personally,
Donald Trump did,
I would prefer that.
About this with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi! Exclamation point. When we know that she was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy.
MAGA came up on that.
If she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's
There's
a
nobody
that's
fucking Marxist. It's so stupid. It's such an old, tired claim.
And when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than
and it's even higher than that.
That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that
He's starting to yell a lot.
They have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
Ooh.
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade.
Damn
Last
right.
year you
That's what he
said
said.
that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Don't attack
The
her.
reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia.
He needs to stop lying about this.
Governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, is doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats
It predominates.
And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion,
Wow,
because the
he's
baby
just
is
lying.
born is okay. And that's not okay with me.
Remember what I said about debating someone who doesn't feel they need to tell the truth?
52
Right here.
years they've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states.
Nope. That's an absolute lie. That is an absolute lie.
And heart and strength.
People need to understand, when he says this, it's not true.
We were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative,
he's lying.
This issue to be brought back
He
to
is
the states
lying.
so people could vote. And that's what happened. And now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's
Fact check him right in spot.
Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump
just got checked twice.
Selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back
Keep
in
that
place
camera
the
right on him.
protections of Roe v. Wade. As President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages.
Abortion czar. Don't call it abortion monitor. It's abortion czar. Donald Trump is going to have an abortion czar.
One's own body should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats,
and so then he lies.
And everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states.
You have a Democrat right next to you who didn't want it, so you don't get to say every Democrat wanted it.
For 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting.
He's repeating. He's voting for his state to have an abortion ban.
As far as the abortion ban, no,
so when
I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter.
A Republican Congress and Senate put an abortion ban in front of him, he will sign it.
National abortion ban if
well, I won't have to because, again, two things. Number
it's not about what not having to. They will put one in front of you.
To get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe.
What are you talking about?
Student loans. And then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach.
Dude.
Look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected
let him talk.
By the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had
look at the look on her face. Look at that look on her face. She's like, motherfucker, what are you talking about?
We talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I
look at that look on her face. She's like, bruh, what are you talking about?
Has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with JD. In all fairness, JD, and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me. But I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They wanted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done.
I mean, let the man talk.
You have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, want to give you your time to respond, but I do want
to ask, took up a lot of time saying that nonsense.
Any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade, and as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples
sure, keep putting his name on that shit.
And dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford.
He just remembered to hold his face, so he went into his serious face.
To another state to get on a plane.
He just remembered that he had to control his face, so he went into his serious face.
Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through.
Oh, keep the cameras on him, man. He's making faces. He's got his lips. Yeah, they saw that happening, so they moved the camera back on him. He was doing that little lip purse and rolling his eyes.
And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President,
excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization.
No, you haven't. You haven't done shit. You haven't been in office.
In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader.
How are you a leader on that?
They know that, and everybody
you didn't do that.
I've been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, You should ask. Will she allow
Here he goes.
abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that?
You don't get to answer ask questions.
Why don't you answer
That's
the
problem.
question? Would you
Because
veto?
under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question. Would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the
If
8th
it's the life of the mother, yes.
Probably after birth. Just look
Probably
at the
after birth.
former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border
he's gotta
security.
stop
We
lying
know
about
it's an
that.
issue that's important to
I think he will.
Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently for President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the
Gotta say,
United
she's good at
States
this.
Congress, including some of the most
She needs
conservative
to answer the
members of
question, though,
United
but she's
States
good at it. She needs to answer
came
that
up
question.
with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country.
So Trump's felonies hasn't come up. She hasn't brought up Trump's
more
felonies.
resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early.
Oh, she's just, what?
And boredom.
Okay, this has nothing to do with anything, Kamala.
You will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your
You got to bring it back around. You did that to get under his skin. I know you did. And then you used it to come into something else. That was devious. And you were almost, you're kind of skirting just being petty. Kind of petty.
Harris, thank you. President
But
Trump,
she's trying to get
I
at
want to
it.
get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to
Got
go.
it.
And the people that do go, she's busing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People
Showing
go to
them
her rallies.
in a different light.
The most
What does that
rallies
mean?
in the history of politics? That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation, and it happened 3.5 years ago.
Getting
And
the team's message here.
what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating.
He brought up that bullshit.
They're eating
Look
the
at
pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back.
He actually
They wanna
mentioned
make America
eating
great again.
dogs and
Simple
cats.
phrase,
He's
make
such
America great again. She's
Oh,
destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there had been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the...
Fact checking in real time.
I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here...
I saw somebody on television. I saw somebody on television.
Used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from television.
I saw this on television.
Was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager.
The internet told me I want to be president of the United States, and I'm going by stuff I saw on the internet.
Extreme. You know, this is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if you didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a four-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security...
Yeah, you're looking mad there, buddy.
...unfit.
Woo, look at that face.
Former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being
clean up your
addressed,
face, buddy.
I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people.
You hired them first.
Graciously, they did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people whose were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper, he was no good, I fired him, so he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me they can write books, with nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy, look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists, they have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Okay.
Let's continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military. You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah. It is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country, and they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And
what's this fool talking about?
This will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow, and I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it. Because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done.
You're going to say the blood?
There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in. And all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought.
You're going to call it Biden crime or something?
know the
something?
FBI says
Kamala crime?
overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris,
FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted
Boom.
for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts.
Former president. She's calling former vice president.
About what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must
36
do to
minutes,
support our
man.
small business,
Wolf.
address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent, and I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal.
Yep.
And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them, but those are cases. It's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis.
She's not going to say it, but the real weaponization of the DOJ was him trying to get Biden, wrapped up by Ukraine when he tried to get Ukraine to charge Biden. That was weaponization.
Essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened
No,
in my
he didn't.
documents case?
He didn't get found guilty. He didn't get tried.
A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political
That's
enemies.
an extreme skewing of what he said. I know what she's referring to. That's an extreme interpretation of what he said.
Understand,
because he didn't say it that way.
Mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no
But she got to him on that.
guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
Weaponized, please.
We gotta
This is the
continue.
one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a
President
fake
Trump.
Russia investigation
We do have a lot to
that
get
went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States, and in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in
All she has to do is say, I got more information and I changed my mind because I had more information.
We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed.
We're almost halfway there.
And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well, first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him, but I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I've built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money.
That was good on him, though. He needed to do that.
She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do
things that no one would ever think of.
on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing, so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up.
What are you talking about? The oil? They got rid of the oil business?
To where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher.
Maybe 6.
Because you're talking about
maybe
3.5 years
Keep
ago.
Going.
They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened again.
He just makes up numbers.
But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out.
Go back, because that's what we used to do.
I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert soil. These are not good things for the environment.
We're going to go back to solar, because we used to be a solar country.
And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. peacefully and patriotically.
Not later on.
And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an
The other side.
police officer.
The other side.
Ever shot her.
You just called the people.
Disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America?
Countries we never heard of.
They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world, and crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when are those, David? When are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle, they went into Seattle, they took over a big percentage of.
Hi, buddy. How you doing?
When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes, sir.
I had nothing to do with that other than
that wasn't the question.
Speech.
These are layups, man.
Said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She
I just got a text from Nancy
The
Pelosi.
question was
That's
about
hilarious.
you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi. But I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say,
she didn't say the thing he's arguing against.
Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper.
See, she said,
still bring it up.
he said there are good people on both sides. She did not say he called white supremacists good people, which is what he's arguing about. He did say there are good people on both sides. He's arguing against something she did not say. She was smart in the way she put it together.
Very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate, because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border, because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed, you'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll say, come on down to the office, let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed. Those people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you, because it really brings this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now?
Yeah, you said that
you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all. I said that sarcastically.
No, you didn't.
It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election,
more people voted.
People should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls. And we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they said we didn't have standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The President of the United States
when you're
doesn't
blind.
have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker, so he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he's having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace.
Oof.
And when
she
you
is
then
coming in
talk
hard
in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person.
Viktor Orban.
Smart.
Viktor Orban.
Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump.
Viktor Orban.
We had no problems with
That's
Trump
your guy.
as president. But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes.
You are all over the place, man. What's going on with this boy?
And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running.
See, he thinks that kind of talk will upset her because he knows that kind of talk would upset him.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up Arabs, Jewish people, Israel. Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big, you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with
the question was how.
Russia ended.
The question was how.
President-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un.
At least he claims to have
exchanged them. It is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders
Stand up straight, man.
Worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down.
I thought there was going to be a commercial break. Must be about now.
Said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it. Because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question: why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world, going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way, gets paid a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate.
He thinks that he can say the kind of things that she says to him and it's going to bug her. She don't give a fuck. Okay, I'm going to pause this.
You thought the first debate was high stakes. How about this second one?
All right.
I'm glad you were watching it here with us on Emma.
I'm going to mute that. I'm going to have a few minutes. I don't know about y'all, but I'm enjoying the fuck out of this thing. Donald Trump's got, like, angry bitch face going on the whole time. Oh, I got a little text here. Hold on a sec. My wife back home, she is not watching. She can't do it. She can't bring herself to watch. Okay. It's too stressful for her. And my son said he's going to hold off watching it, and he's going to watch it double speed after it's done, which is probably the best way to watch this thing. But, whew, okay. So, like I said, I'm just going to upload this after I'm done. Let's see, we're 2/3 of the way through. This is not the same debate that it was last time. This is not the Biden debate. She's coming correct. It's Jon Stewart. She's coming correct with most of her approaches. I'm never a fan. I am never a fan. I don't care if I support the person. I am never a fan of a person not addressing a question altogether. If you need to briefly answer the question and then quickly pivot to make your attack points or follow up on the other thing, fine. I get that. But you need to address the question. That's just, yeah, I understand there's a kind of an art to this. You know, there are some questions you answer, and the other ones you don't. There's like this dance. It's like, I'm going to answer your question. This time I'm not going to answer your question. I'm going to answer this one, maybe part of it, and all politicians do it. It annoys me no matter what. But I feel the best approach is to immediately answer the question. And even if it's just like, of course I do. And then you move on, and then you go to your other thing. You've got, 90 seconds or whatever the rule is, and do it that way, as opposed to immediately going into the response to the other side, and then maybe possibly addressing it, or being allowed to drift on, and not getting called with a follow-up. I wish all moderators would give at least one more repeat of the question, say, hey, your time is up, but I'm going to give you 10 more seconds to answer the question, yes or no, whatever it is. Do you blah, blah, blah. And if they choose not to answer, say, okay, thank you. Your time is up. We're gonna go on to the next question. And they both do it. Yeah, that's just the way it goes. But she is particularly good at it. And she's been doing a good job of getting her points in. Now, the thing that's going on here is that they are both trying to needle the other. The problem is that the things that Trump says to try to needle her are the kind of things that would upset him, and she doesn't care. So when she says, you're a failure, or you're weak, coming from him, it means nothing to her. But when she says to him he's a failure, or that he appears weak, it bugs him, because he cares what other people think. And whether or not he likes her, he cares that she said it and other people might have heard it, and he needs to fight back against it. So they're trying similar tactics, but what Trump doesn't understand is it doesn't work on her. He needs to find some other tactic. Now, there are a couple things he did that I thought were smart, which was, find ways of bringing it back to some contradiction or some change of hers. If she doesn't answer a question completely, call out that she didn't answer a question completely, because it was a question to her. Doesn't mean you have to answer the question completely. Yours is a response to her, so you should call her out for that type of thing. But he did it a couple times. He kind of brought it into like, well, you're saying this, but what you said before was that, and your old policy was this. And a few times he did it. I think it was smart of him to do it, but most of the time he's missing those shots, and he's going for something else because she's got him in the ego fighting game. I think we're about to start back up again. Okay, here we go.
Or Ukraine, we're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break.
Don't ask him what he would do. He's not going to do it. He's not going to say. Don't ask it. That's a stupid question to ask. I'm sorry. It's a dumb question to ask. He's not going to answer that question.
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more, because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason?
Dude,
he hasn't even made a phone call.
Get back on track, man.
Spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with
why are you attacking him?
President that we don't even know if he's. Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here,
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even.
Why is it always a dog?
He president, but we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up.
What's wrong with this man? What is wrong with this man?
Do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right,
negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to define one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
They don't have to memorize it.
And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Ooh.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women.
Because he would have just given it up.
In Moscow, quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now.
Yeah.
But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening. But he does have that, something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore
so many faces are going to be screen grabbed from this.
Democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is Commander-in-Chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stop talking, Trump.
Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever
seen.
He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying, one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you. Otherwise, we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government.
He calls her weak, and she doesn't care.
Terrorist organization called the
she
Taliban.
Calls him weak, and you can see that it bothers him.
The Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive
There's the question.
Respected world leaders.
That she needs to answer.
And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States
Trump's got
to
some
be
upper lip sweat
Commander-in-Chief
going
with a
on over
level
there.
of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So, if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems.
And he said, no way.
Why do you send me a
And I said, way.
I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement.
Not 18 months, so 18 months apart. 11 months in your administration, 7 months in the Biden administration.
Faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country.
All right.
President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make
Stop talking now. Just leave that as your answer.
Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words. So
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
What? Stop talking, man.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea
you
what
need
a
to
good
stop him
economy
because
is.
he's drifted back off the
policies,
subject.
every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman. She says, she is Biden.
What are you talking
the
about?
Worst inflation we've ever had.
I don't know the gentleman.
Horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad that she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time's up.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction.
You screwed up, Dave.
To
You gave her an opening.
Their ambitions, their
See, this is the kind of thing that that Joe Biden used to be able to do, but he couldn't, and so he had this, this bat was on his shoulder the entire time. But this is the kind of thing we were wanting Joe Biden to do to him, and she's doing it.
Allowing people
We
to be able to
being
pursue
people like me.
what has been
Maybe
fleeting
not all
in
of
terms
you.
of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation.
I like how she's talking about the conversation they want tonight. 2 minutes before it's over, she's talking about the conversation they want tonight. Well, guess what? They're not getting it because it's 2 minutes before the end.
President Trump.
Let's turn to policy, please.
She has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she has a plan to not allow
Keep talking. Just talk over it.
Okay, that's what her plan is until just recently.
I just need to respond.
President
The
Trump
president has said something twice that I need to respond to.
I'm sorry. We're going to move on, Vice President Harris. President Trump, this is now your third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act.
You don't have time for Affordable Care Act, man. We got like 3 more minutes.
You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it.
You've been working on things for years, man.
This. I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it.
Because it was before you.
They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But
if they would have done it, I would have had a... He just said that if the Democrats had changed the plan,
do I save it?
Then we would have had a better plan.
Never going to be great.
That's his excuse for not changing the plan.
Let it rot. And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones.
Yeah, a bunch of bad ones.
We have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing.
What did you do?
It's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people.
What did you do?
And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But
everybody can say that.
As good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president.
Oh, That was not good. I have concepts of a plan. That one is going to be on a headline.
We have to do that, and you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Concepts of a plan. That's like binders full of women.
Supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a
Concepts
government-run
of a
healthcare
plan.
system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time. When I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate, and the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged.
It was John McCain
as being, you don't like him, you said at the time, because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions.
Sorry, that was a good that was a good laugh. I needed that one.
Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president, and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act.
All right, time to wrap it up.
For the first time,
it's time to get on to closing remarks. She's going to have his, and he's got the last word.
Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it, pass this prologue in terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue.
We only got so much time.
I made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what?
Of course.
We can do much better than Obamacare. Much less money.
Do it.
But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance.
How? I don't know anything about these kind of things. I don't know how she can improve private insurance.
Government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular
we got
voters, and that's climate change.
Up.
President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well,
yeah, you got to hold it to them. We hold them to it. We got to go.
And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes
he looks like a weird bird.
Growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up
auto
plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
It did happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, there was 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China pays millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million?
Why are you talking about this? She's like, what's he got to do with me? What's your man got to do with me?
$1 million. This is a crooked administration,
look
and
at his
they're
face.
selling our
Look
country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates.
He is wasting his time.
ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a minute.
Whatever you expected, whatever any of us expected, this debate is, of course, as high stakes.
Okay, closing statements. All right, this will be good because Trump needs a chance to calm down. So I think he's going to get his act together. He's going to come in. He's going to be a little bit calmer. Harris is already calm. She's cool. There was a couple times where he was able to goad her into some petty bickering stuff, and then she reset. So he was able to grab her a little bit. It's interesting that the moderators, and maybe because apparently the woman moderator is a friend of Kamala Harris, the moderators are giving a little bit more deference to Trump when it comes to those interruptions. I don't have a problem with that, because the more he talks, the worse it is. But, you know, when he runs long, or when he interrupts and starts talking, they tend to turn his mic back on and allow him to, while they tended to go back and forth with Harris and try to stop her much more than they tried to stop Trump. And again, I don't mind that, because the more Trump talks, the crazier he sounds. He ramps himself up. Trump's not doing himself any favors on this. Now, that does not mean that I think no matter what happens, Kamala Harris could twist her ankle and spike herself on her heels when she comes back, and she still will have won this debate. But no matter what, it doesn't matter if she wins the debate. The spin is going to be very important, you know, and you know, that's going to be a big move when it comes to this thing. And when it comes to how this affects the polls and things like that, I think Harrison was in both a stronger, she was in a better position. She could do herself more help, and she could do herself more harm. She was in a more influential position. Trump is what Trump is. He kind of has a floor and a ceiling, and there's not much in there. There's maybe 2 or 3% difference in that floor and that ceiling. We don't know what Harris's floor or her ceiling is right now. And so she has much, she can lose a lot more. There's a potential for her to lose a lot more if she did poorly in this. And there's a potential for her to gain a lot more if since she did well in this. But there's no, there's no guarantee of that. But Trump's numbers aren't going to change much. He may drop a point, but the question is not like how much is negative it's going to be for him. It's going to be how positive or negative is it going to be for her, because he's pretty much at his threshold. Let's see, I got a little message from work here. I got to make sure because I'm going to have to head downstairs the second this is done. And then if there's no active work, I will chop this video up, and not chop it up. I'll stick the bumper on the end of it, the outro on it, and upload it. So let's see. Are we there? We coming back? Nope. Okay. Still got more. Still got more. So anyway, I'm curious what you have going on in the chat. Not the chat, but in the comments. Tell me what you think of the debate. Tell me what you think of my responses and my reactions. It's not going to make any difference. It's not like, you saying that I was too harsh is going to make me change my mind. But I'm curious. Oh, are we coming back? It's just a commercial of Rachel. That is not a great camera angle, girl. Should have had him tell you to sit up straight. Okay, so are we back? I think we are coming back. We are coming back.
The final segment of this presidential debate between former President Donald.
Okay. Anyway. Okay, here we go. I think we're on our way back. All righty. Sorry for this dead air there.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us, and we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States
She's
senator,
smoothly
and
going
now
into
vice
her
president. I've only
campaign
had one
role.
client, the people.
And
I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump.
Well timed.
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack, we're not going to take fossil fuel, we're not going to do things that are going to...
You should have wrote a freaking speech,
whether
dude.
you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision.
I'm gonna wing it.
Let's ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Day.
All righty. So I have to cut this, and I got to get back to the war room because I thought this was supposed to be over at 10:30, and it's now 10:45, and I got to get back down to work. All I can say is like, yo, she cooked him. He looked cooked at the end there. He's so red and upset. That was something to watch. The boy ain't right. The boy is shook, and the boy is not stable. All he cares about is just personal, petty hate mongering. It was all there on display. And I think those closing statements were great because it showed her being presidential and calm and unifying, and him being divisive. And that is the difference between the two of them. You can say you don't believe her, but that is the message she is bringing out, which is unity. You can say that when she gets in, she'll do something else, but you don't know. We do know that Donald Trump is going to be the divisive person he is showing himself to be. We know that. So, all right, everybody, I got to head back to the war room. Thank you very much for any of you who have spent your time listening to me, ramble and dead silence as I, got distracted by things like work. But let me know how you feel about it in the comments, and probably do a follow-up video responding to things in the comments. But all right, everybody, take care. Peace.
That's my job. That's what I do. I don't lose. I win. Is there no one on this planet to even challenge me?
Maybe you came by to congratulate me on last night's victory.